252,756 miles from Earth. That's how far 4 people traveled last week. And broke a record that had stood for 54 years. Most of you didn't see it on the news. Artemis 2 just happened. 4 astronauts flew around the moon, no landing, no orbit, just a slingshot trip in 9 days. Here's the whole story. Chapter 1, the 50-year gap. December 1972, Gene Cernan stepped off the lunar surface, climbed back into the ascent module, and that was it. The last human footprint on the moon. Nobody knew it would take over 50 years to send anyone back. Everything after that, the shuttle, the ISS, Hubble, all of it stayed within about 400 kilometers of Earth, low Earth orbit. We got really good at hanging out in the neighborhood and never actually going anywhere. The moon race was always political math. NASA got 4% of the federal budget in 1966. By 1975, it was below 1%. When the Cold War stakes dropped, so did the funding. Congress kept approving budgets that couldn't sustain it. End of story. The Artemis program started in 2017, picked up serious steam under the 2020 directive to land by 2024, which, didn't happen, and eventually became the biggest crewed spaceflight program since Apollo. $93 billion, that's the cumulative cost of the Artemis program through last year. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the GDP of New Zealand, spent on a rocket you use once and then throw away. Each SLS launch runs about $4.1 billion. The rocket itself is $2.2 billion. Orion capsule is another billion. Everything else, ground system, support, the works rounds it out. One Falcon 9 is 67 million. Before they put people on it, NASA flew Artemis 1 in November 2022, uncrewed. They needed to validate the SLS rocket and prove the Orion capsule could survive deep space and re-entry. It did, mostly. The heat shield came back with unexpected damage. Ablative material eroded in over 100 locations. That's the thing that protects astronauts from 5,000 degree re-entry heat. They had to figure out what went wrong before they could send humans. The root cause was the avcoat material's permeability, basically trapped gas blowing out chunks during re-entry. For Artemis 2, they switched to a steeper direct entry instead of a skip trajectory. No more low temperature trap phase. It worked. So what changed? Artemis exists because of 3 overlapping pressures: a new space race with China, commercial partnerships with SpaceX and Blue Origin, and a genuine scientific case for the lunar South Pole, water ice that could fuel future deep space missions. Chapter 2, the mission. April 1st, 2026, 6:35 p.m. Eastern. Launch Complex 39B at Kennedy Space Center, same pad that launched Apollo 10. The SLS lit up and 4 people left Earth for the first time in over half a century. At Mission Control in Houston, every console had been rehearsed hundreds of times. Flight controllers who'd never worked a deep space mission sat next to veterans who remembered Apollo. The energy in that room was something else. Artemis 2 flew what's called a free return trajectory, a figure-8 path that uses Earth and moon gravity to sling the spacecraft around and bring it home without burning a lot of fuel. Apollo 13 used the same trick to survive. That's literally the only reason that crew made it back. Days 1 and 2 were trans-lunar injection. That's fancy talk for we pointed it at the moon and lit the engine. Orion cruised at about 25,000 miles per hour to cover the 239,000 miles to the moon. April 6th, day 6, the moon filled the windows. Orion came within 4,067 miles of the lunar surface. The far side, no less, that's close enough to see individual craters. 7 hours of lunar observation. Then they flew behind it and the comms went dark. 40 minutes, mission control couldn't reach them. When you're behind the moon, the signal is blocked by 2,159 miles of solid rock. Ground teams just had to wait. The crew was on their own with nothing but their training and each other. From behind the moon, they watched a solar eclipse, Earth blocking the sun from their perspective. They saw the solar corona, stars visible in daylight, planets, and then Earth set. The entire planet dropped below the lunar horizon. You don't train for what that feels like. April 6th, during that flyby 252,756 miles from Earth, that broke Apollo 13's record from 1970, a record that had stood for 54 years. Lowell Swigert haze held it longer than most people alive today have been alive. This was the view from the capsule. The moon right there, 4,000 miles below. The crew could identify color variations in the regolith, browns, blues, oranges that indicate different geological ages, billions of years of history visible from a window. While they were up there, the crew provisionally named two craters they spotted. One they called Integrity after the spacecraft, the other Carroll. We'll come back to what that one means. It's a lot. Nothing in spaceflight is perfect. A urine vent line froze mid-mission and there was a small helium leak in the propulsion system. Neither threatened the crew, but NASA's writing it all up. These are the exact kinds of things that get fixed before the next flight. 9 days, 1 hour, 32 minutes after launch, Orion hit the atmosphere at around 25,000 miles per hour. The heat shield held, the parachutes deployed, and they splashed down in the Pacific Ocean southwest of San Diego, 2.9 miles from the target point. Chapter 3. The hardware. The Space Launch System. It's big, really big. Taller than the Statue of Liberty, generates 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, more than any rocket since the Saturn V. It's also expendable, which means the whole thing goes into the ocean after launch. One SLS launch costs about $2.2 billion. A Falcon 9, which is actually a bigger payload to orbit in many scenarios, costs $67 million, lands itself and flies again. That comparison is not comfortable for NASA and they know it. The Orion capsule is called Integrity. 4 crew, 30% more interior space than the Apollo command module, and finally one toilet. The crew also has a dedicated radiation shelter for solar events and a flight computer about 20,000 times faster than anything Apollo flew with. The big anxiety coming off Artemis 1 was the heat shield, 100 plus erosion sites from unexpected ablation. The fix was elegant, change the re-entry angle. Steeper direct entry instead of skip re-entry eliminates the temperature phase that was trapping gas. Char loss was, quote, significantly reduced. One thing they didn't fully solve, the root permeability issue in the Avcoat material itself. That fix is coming for Artemis 3. Essentially, they worked around it for Artemis 2, but the actual material redesign takes longer. That's not ideal when you're planning a landing. Here's a quick side-by-side. Apollo command module, 3 astronauts, no toilet, 2 weeks of food max, computer comparable to a basic calculator. Orion, 4 astronauts, toilet, radiation shelter, 6 weeks of consumables, and more than 1,000 times more computing power. Attached to Orion is the European service module built by ESA. It's the power and propulsion system, solar panels, main engine, life support consumables, Europe's contribution to Artemis. In exchange, European astronauts get seats. Jeremy Hansen from Canada was one of them. The full 9-day arc launch, translunar injection, the figure 8 around the moon, lunar flyby at 4,067 miles, then the return, the whole thing managed by a team of flight controllers who basically hadn't slept since launch week. One thing that catches a lot of people, Artemis 2 didn't orbit the moon, they flew around it in a free return path. The far side got a close-up, but there was no time to survey the South Pole. That's Artemis 3's job. For now, the moon got one very fast pass. Apollo 8 in December 1968 actually entered lunar orbit, or they circled it 10 times. Artemis 2 did a flyby, no orbit, different mission design. Apollo 8 went 6 days, Artemis 9, and Apollo 8's crew of 3 had, shall we say, significantly fewer creature comforts. Getting ready for this took years, deep sea diving to simulate lunar EVAs, centrifuge runs at 9G for re-entry, months of simulation with failure scenarios. The video from their training sessions is genuinely intense. This was the launch. Watch the SLS clear the tower. Chapter 4. The crew and the firsts they made. 4 people. Reed Wiseman, Commander, Victor Glover, Pilot, Christina Koch, Mission Specialist, Jeremy Hansen, Mission Specialist from the Canadian Space Agency, 3 Americans and a Canadian. Each one of them carries a specific first that matters. Reed Wiseman is the mission commander, Navy test pilot, former ISS commander, now leading the first crewed lunar mission in more than half a century. The spacecraft is named Integrity. He helped pick that name. And the Carroll crater we mentioned, that one's his. Victor Glover is the pilot. He's also the first person of color ever to travel beyond low Earth orbit. That's not a small thing. It means every human who had ever gone to the moon or even close in the last 50 years of spaceflight history was white. That changes now. Christina Koch is the mission specialist, and she's the first woman in history to travel beyond low Earth orbit. First woman to fly around the moon. She spent 328 days on the ISS in a record-setting single spaceflight. She knew what long missions feel like. She was ready. Jeremy Hansen is the mission specialist from Canada's space agency. He's the first non-American ever to fly on a lunar mission. CSA contributed engineering, funding, and partnership to Artemis, and Hansen's seat is part of that deal. Canada literally went to the moon. Behind the moon, when comms were out, Jeremy Hansen formally requested that a newly spotted crater be named after Reed Wiseman's late wife, Carroll. She died of cancer in May 2020. Wiseman never made it to space. Between her diagnosis and her death, he made it now, and she went with him. When they broke the distance record, Jeremy Hansen said, "From the cabin of integrity, as we surpass the furthest distance humans have ever traveled from planet Earth, we do so in honoring the extraordinary efforts and feats of our predecessors. And then, we most importantly challenge this generation and the next to make sure this record is not long-lived." And after splashdown, Wiseman said something that's hard to shake. "We are bonded forever, and no one down here is ever going to know what the four of us just went through. Crew bonds forged in a place no one alive today except those four people has been." Before any of this, there were years of training. This is what some of it looked like. Koch described the crew dynamic like this. A crew is a group that is in it all the time, no matter what, inescapably, beautifully, dutifully linked. 9 days, 252,000 miles, things you can't unsee. The USS San Diego was waiting, recovery divers in the water, the Orion floating, slightly charred in the Pacific. Wiseman, Glover, Koch, Hansen walked out healthy. 9 days, no injuries, no medical issues worth mentioning. A clean bill of health for the whole program. This mission confirmed SLS flies crewed, Orion flies crewed, the heat shield works under human-rated conditions, the free return trajectory works, 4 people can function safely in deep space for 9 days. That's the baseline you need before you try to land. Chapter 5. What comes next? Artemis 3 was supposed to be the landing. It's been restructured. Instead of going straight to landing, NASA is now doing orbital rendezvous tests with Starship HLS and Jeff Bezos' Blue Moon lander in Earth orbit. They want to prove docking before they commit to doing it near the moon. SpaceX's Starship human landing system is the vehicle that's supposed to take astronauts from lunar orbit down to the surface for Artemis 4. SpaceX is targeting the first orbital refueling demo in June 2026. Uncrewed lunar landing June 2027, crewed surface mission earliest September 2028. And there's Blue Origin's Blue Moon lander as a second option. Jeff Bezos has been quietly building this for years, and it now has a contract for Artemis missions. Having 2 competing landers is actually smart strategy. If one slips, you've got a backup. Artemis 4 is now the target for the first actual crewed lunar landing since Apollo 17, penciled in for around 2028. That's assuming Starship HLS hits its marks, which given SpaceX's history is not a certainty but also more plausible than most people would have said 5 years ago. While all this is happening, China has Chang'e 7 heading to the lunar South Pole mid-2026. Robotic, but it's their scouting mission for ice deposits. Their crewed lunar goal is 2030. They're not going to land before us, but they're not far behind either. Here's the thing nobody loves to say out loud. At $4.1 billion launch, Artemis isn't sustainable at scale. If you want a permanent lunar presence, which is the actual goal, you need costs to come down. That's why Starship matters. Not just as a lander, but as proof that getting to the moon doesn't have to cost a small country's GDP every time. Here's the framing I'd push back on. Calling Artemis a waste because it hasn't landed yet misses what it actually is. It's the infrastructure layer. Certification of hardware, training of crews, validation of procedures. You can't skip this. Apollo didn't either, but they flew Mercury and Gemini first. The lunar south pole has permanently shadowed craters with water ice. If you can mine it, you can make rocket fuel, the hydrogen and oxygen date on the moon itself. That changes the economics of everything beyond it. Mars, asteroids, long duration missions. The south pole is why we're back. Longer term, NASA wants to build the Gateway, a small space station in lunar orbit. Think ISS, but around the moon. That becomes the hub for surface missions, science experiments, and eventually a staging point for Mars. It's ambitious, it's expensive, and it might actually happen. Pull back and look at it. December 1972 to April 2026. 53 years and 4 months. That gap is longer than the entire history of powered flight from Kitty Hawk to the moon landing. We stopped, we almost forgot how to do it, and then 4 people did it again. 4 humans. One capsule called Integrity, 252,000 miles from home, the farthest anyone has ever been. They came back. And whoever lands first next time, whether it's 2028 or 2030 or whenever, this is the mission that made it possible. Drop a comment. NASA's Artemis or SpaceX's Starship, which actually puts humans on the moon first? Spicy takes welcome. And if you've made it this far, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep going.